Hello there, my name's Vince, I'm a composer, welcome back to the channel. In this video I'll be talking about my track Revenge Fantasy, which I wrote for Reliable Source Music. It was part of a production music album aimed at true crime shows, inspired by the current crop of Netflix shows in that genre. So kind of grisly, tension-inducing, anxiety-provoking, slightly twisted tracks was the goal. So let's just have a listen first of all, and then I'll play some of the individual tracks and you can see how it's being constructed and how that relates to what I was imagining for true crime. So as you can hear, it's not terribly complicated from a composing perspective, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was easy to create. I think with these sorts of tracks, it takes a while often to find the right pieces, which you can then repeat quite a lot. Yeah, there's often a lot more emphasis on texture, on more subtle forms of development that aren't necessarily note or chord based. So first of all, we have this very characteristic synth bass element that's pulsing away. It's a trillion patch, as it happens. This one, it's based on Big and Clicky, and I've done a bit of tweaking to the parameters, including messing around with the release time there. And then later on in the track, it goes into a double speed. There's some pumping strings here where I've used a plugin called Pitch Funk. There are other plugins similar to this. I think one of them is called Shaperbox or LFO Tool. These consist of different LFOs that you can assign to simple parameters like volume or pitch. So for example, that is a pitch modulation that's being caused by this LFO here. And there's also an overall dynamic ramp and decrease that's happening on this LFO. So without it, it's just this element. Without the Pitch Funk plugin, it's just a chaotic string sound from Cage by 8dio. I like the idea of using it as a rhythmic element. So with it, I think these elements also reminded me a bit of when you're panicking a bit and you can sort of hear your blood rushing through your veins and your heartbeat seems really loud, and sometimes the sound that you're hearing feels a bit compressed or a bit distorted. There was something about that which felt appropriate. We've got the short strings element, which is another one of our main hooks. This idea here. They're a bit wonky. I've manually programmed these, so they're all very off the grid. And I just wanted to get the right kind of swing, if that's the correct terminology. So the whole thing just sort of staggers along. It's not a super pronounced effect, but I think this just gives it a bit more character. I'll just play it in context and just listen specifically to the spiccato strings. They're a bit just unsettling the material a little bit. We have these low string sustainy bits. It's a nice juicy double bass patch from Adagio by 8Dio there. And that brings us to our string echo lead, which is in combination with these live cellos down here. So we've got some sort of stereo sounding delays, and this melody, if you can call it a melody, it's more of a chord outline or an arpeggio really. We've got B flat, B natural, E flat, G. So we've got an E flat major arpeggio with a B natural in there, creating an interesting tension against the fifth of the chord. So we've got a sound of something threatening and dissonant, but at the same time this major chord quality. It just feels a little bit sickening in the right way. Is this confusion between major and minor, this feeling of just conflict and mixed emotions. It actually oscillates between this E flat major and this E flat minor, which is the same idea but with a minor third. Later on in the track it just settles into E flat minor, more or less. Kind of staying in that key area, so it's a bit more sort of set on destruction there, but in that first more floaty section it's a bit more of a mixed bag. Next we've got some percussion. So in the first section of the track we just have lots of elements that are doing quite characterful and quite distinct hits, whether they're metallic or wood or like sub booms or doo sounds. So let's just listen to some of those. Sub boom there from I believe it's the Evolution Atlantica library. A ping pong delayed stick click, probably from Damage. We've got a sort of low groan followed by a sub boom and a stick click. So what I like about these is that they're all quite distinct. Each element has a very specific thing that it does. Sometimes those pre-made trailer elements and stings and whooshes and things can be a bit overly complicated and pull your track in a direction that isn't quite what you originally imagined. And so I prefer to use simpler elements and kind of log those elements away in my brain somewhere so that I can reach for them when the time comes. It still has a fair bit of space. So the elements that we have going on are this brush sample from Damage. We've got these trailer hits, again quite vanilla ones. The real meat of the rhythm is coming from this epic drum from Damage. Again, I've taken quite a bit of the top end off there. We've got a more spacious, echoey element here. So the sound of the ambience in the room to me is really important, almost as much as the hit itself. And we've got a kind of gong swishing element from Play. In the pads, I've got this quite nice and rich pad from an Omnisphere patch. This sound below it was generated using Logic's Chroma Verb. So this is a great technique which I use all the time. I'll just load it up here so you can see what I mean. And I usually load up this concert hall setting and I'll just turn the wet up, turn the dry down, turn the decay up, and then I'll automate this freeze control. So I'll play a riff like that, and then when the reverb is still going on, I'll hit freeze. and that gives us our pad, and it's sort of gently modulating. And finally we have this scratchy rhythmic element provided by a live cello and also the Swam violin. Let's just have a listen to that. You get some nice divergence there in the pitch, just creates some extra richness. And in context, before finishing, I just wanted to give a few thoughts about the area of mixing and audio production on a project like this. Personally, I find it very helpful to limit my involvement on the mix side, in the knowledge that I'll be sending these stems off to an external mix engineer. So if we have a quick look at the tracks here, you can see that there really isn't that much going on in terms of mixing. It's more just sound shaping and character effects here, things like echo buoys and reverbs, and using some sort of quite heavy-handed effects moves, such as lopping off all of the top end on something like I've done here, for example. So you can hear the extent to which I mix personally and then compare that to the final project. I'll just flick back and forward between this mix down here, which is the final track, which I've tried to roughly balance against my rough mix, which you can see and hear in Logic. So as you can hear, overall the final mix is quite a bit brighter. The dynamics are a lot more controlled in that final mix. It's a bit more compressed overall. But as you can hear, it's not like it's transformed massively in terms of the overall impact of the material and the intention of the different instruments. And to me, especially under dialogue, my track would still hold its own and would still communicate the emotional content of what I'm trying to say musically. It's just to kind of put things in some kind of perspective. Where I personally try to focus my time is more on the sound selection, the arrangement, the material, the notes, making each part as expressive as possible or as consistent as possible if that's what's required. And then allowing others to come in and do their part and collaborate so that we can together create the best possible piece of music according to the brief. So thanks very much. That's the end of my little fly through of the track for this true crime project. I hope that was interesting. Feel free to drop me any questions in the comments. And in the meantime, thanks for your attention and see you on the next video.